All right, mate. Start recording. So, hello, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you are in the world. I know we've got an international audience, and it's really good to see you here or hear you here. And welcome to Here's Tom with the Weather, and back again for the second week at our new time of 8 p.m. in the UK and Ireland on a Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern and noon in Pacific. 7 a.m. Sydney and Melbourne, and 6 a.m. in Brisbane. And I'm always amazed that I can remember all these time zones. But that's only Vicky and I will be able to explain that to you. But it's really good to see you here. And just wanted to, just a couple of little housekeeping things. Well, the big one is just to remind everyone that this is not an AA meeting. This is not an all share meeting. This is basically an exploration of the 11th step as described in the 12 steps of recovery. And that's usually associated with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But whatever fellowship or whatever recovery you're in, this is the place for you. If you're looking to find a higher power, if you're interested in spirituality and you're looking at conceiving of a higher power, then this is where we sort of explore all kinds of different things. And as I said, we've done everything. Last week we had a Zen guy, a Zen master from Belfast. The next week we're going to have all kinds of different religions or whatever spirituality. And it's a celebration of that and really trying to help people to conceive of that and how they've applied the 12 steps, and particularly step 11. And so it's really good to see you all here. So I'm just going to read you a little bio of our guest. Now, our guest is Jeremy Pemberton. Now, Jeremy is 64 years old, and he's been a Church of England clergyman since 1981. He was born in Cambridge and raised in a teaching family, and he's the eldest of 3 children. He was a very musical child. A bit of background about Jeremy, and he played the piano and the cello, and he eventually joined the National Youth Orchestra. His teenage years were unfortunately dominated by his mother's death from a car accident, which had a devastating effect on the family. And I think Jeremy's described as that he said that bereavement care in the 1970s was virtually non-existent. So he described those years as very unhappy. He was brought up in a very conventional Church of England way, and he did go to church occasionally, and when he wasn't singing in the choir. He came to his faith. He really found his faith when he was 17. And part of that commitment, he had a commitment to sort of find his way back to God. He studied music at university, but I think his hopes and his dreams of music sort of faded as he began to sense that his vocation lay in a ministry. He was ordained young. He's worked in places like Leeds in the north of England, in industrial rural areas, in Central Africa, and a large group of parishes around the Cambridgeshire area in the UK. Jeremy came out as gay at age 50, and he describes this as being traumatic. He was married with a family of 5 children, but he was at that time, but it was also something that he says probably saved his life that he came out, and something that he was unable to face living with any longer. And then since then, and this is where we're going to be talking about today, he has, and these are in his own words, he's had to negotiate all kinds of complicated changes, and we're going to find out about that today. And these complicated changes have come as he's worked the last 13 years as an NHS chaplain, and where he's also combined that with working as a professional singer in the cathedral town in which he lives. Now, as I've said to you, Jeremy practices the 12 steps. I'm not going to break his anonymity. I'm going to leave that up to him, whether he chooses to do that or not. But this is, again, it's particularly about step 11. But I'm going to open up start asking a couple of questions. And then later on, after 20 or so minutes, I'm going to invite people to raise their hands and ask a question. As I say, it's not an all share, it's a question. So if you've got questions about your conception of a higher power and how that applies to step 11 and maybe step 3, then please ask away. So I'm just going to this is what I always ask with our guests, and just going to ask you this, Jeremy, is that you've been afforded the opportunity to have a dinner party with your favorite person from history, whether they're currently living or they're dead, but a spiritual leader, your favorite spiritual leader. Can you tell me who you would above all else love to have dinner with? Why, and what would you have for pudding?
Hi, Dave. Hello, everybody. I'm Jeremy, and I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a member of a sister fellowship, or I count myself a member of a sister fellowship. And I'll tell you a bit more about that. But I am married to someone who is a member of your fellowship, and I'm allowed to break his anonymity with his express permission. So I may do that a bit later. Anyway, back to your question, Dave. So I've decided I'd like to have dinner with Hildegard of Bingham. So hands up anyone who's heard of Hildegard of Bingham. Yeah, I thought so. Okay, so she was a nun. She was a nun in Germany about, I don't know, maybe 1,000 years ago, something like that. And she was a mystic, and she was in charge of a monastery. She was also a very great composer. She was the first great female writer of music that we know about. And she wrote some absolutely astonishing, beautiful, beautiful music, and some very profound kind of spiritual writing. So I'd love to go and have dinner with Hildegard and say, how do you manage all this? You know, you are kind of superwoman, really. And for pudding, we'd just have some grapes, I think.
Good choice. Thank you very much. Yes, I have heard of Hildegard. So, Jeremy, just in your own words, I just wanted you, could you just describe what's happened now? I know that what the big challenges, I mean, amongst the many challenges that you've faced, has happened in the last several years, where you decided to do the right thing as by your faith and get married to your partner, and that has led to you bumping heads, shall we say? That's probably a real mild way of saying it, with the Church of England. Could you just give us a rundown of what's happened and how that happened, please?
Okay, so when I came out in 2007, I needed to kind of move away, and I started life again in the little town I live in. And I then, about a year later, I met Lawrence, who is now my husband. And after about 6 months or so, he moved in. People around here were very suspicious. They thought it was all far too quick, and they're quite protective of me. But it was, you know, we knew it would be all right. And anyway, so then the law looked as if the law was going to change. Neither of us particularly wanted to have a civil partnership, because for us, there was something spiritual about the idea of marriage. We both had failed marriages. We'd both been married to women, but we were both quite committed to the idea of marriage as expressing something very profound about the kind of giving of yourself to another person. And so we didn't want a civil partnership, and we waited and to see what would happen. And the law looked as if it was going to change. And so we decided to get married. Well, because I was a Church of England clergyman, I thought it would be polite to tell my bishop I was planning to do this. So I did, and he wasn't terrifically thrilled about the idea and asked me not to do it. And I said, well, no, sorry, I'm going to. It's perfectly legal for me to do it, and I really think I should. Anyway, it did create a bit of a media splash. I was famous for 15 minutes. And if you Google my name, you can read the story if you've never heard it before. So it was tricky, really, because I put myself right across the leadership of my own church, and it's not something I had ever done before. It's not something I did lightly, but I felt that it was for me, it was a spiritual and a conscientious decision to marry Lauren. The problem really started when I live in one part of the Church of England and I worked in another, and I was treated in different ways. I got a kind of rap over the knuckles from the bit I worked in, but the bit I lived in, they were a bit more hostile. And in the NHS, I then applied for another job, which was nearer to where I lived. And because there isn't a national registration system for chaplains, what the NHS does is it asks your religious body, if you're a Christian or a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Muslim or whatever it is, it asks that to as it were, guarantee that you are kosher, you're the real thing, and not just some flake who's put a dog collar on. So they wrote to the bishop and said, will you give this man a license? And the bishop wrote back and said no. So there was kind of a month or two of toing and froing and arguing about this, but the bishop just refused to. He said, no, he's got married, he's gone against what the bishops wanted, so I'm not going to. So I lost the job, so I lost that employment. And I thought, well, this is the point at which either I have to kind of just let them roll all over me and just take it on the chin, or I have to say no. And I thought, I'm going to say no. So I took them to an employment tribunal, and we went through 3 stages: employment tribunal, employment appeal tribunal, and appeal court, and we lost. We shouldn't have, but they said, yes, they have discriminated against you on the grounds of your sexuality and your marriage, but they have the legal right to. I still think it was probably wrong, but hey. So we did that. That took about 3 years, to be honest. And I was incredibly supported by an amazing legal team, most of whom did it for nothing because they believed in the case. That, in a way, that was that. So with something like that, as anyone who's been involved in litigation like that will know, you kind of have to decide, am I going to let this take me over? Or am I just going to put this in a box so that when I need to deal with it, I'll take the box off the shelf and we'll have a look at it, we'll do the next bit, and I put it back and I get on with life, because you can get very obsessional about it. So disappointing result, but very challenging. I mean, I was cross-examined in a very hostile way for 2 days, right? Which was not an experience. No, not 2 days, day and a half, to be honest. I mustn't exaggerate. Here I am on the yes. With your rigorous honesty.
Jeremy, I mean, that it sounds horrific, and you've given me, and I've as I said, I've did a bit of research on the story, and you very kindly sent me your story. I'm just, as a man of faith and somebody who has practiced the 12 steps, surely that was, to have your very church come down on you and interrogate you with such hostility. Two things: it must have did it shake your faith? Did you have any doubts in your faith and what you were doing in terms of, who you were and your as you said, your dedication to the ministry? And secondly is, like, how did the steps help you with that?
Okay, so the action was heartbreaking to do, but then I was pretty heartbroken anyway by what I felt was an enormous piece of rejection when I'd given 35 years to this organization. I mean, I felt they treated me appallingly, really. There was no pastoral care, it was just horrendous. Anyway, so that was heartbreaking, but no, it didn't shake my faith, actually, because in the end of the day, human institutions are shit, frequently. And, just because it's got the word church at the top doesn't mean it's nice. Any big organization, on the whole, they tend to treat people very, very poorly. Unless you're lucky and you get one of the ones that has very good systems in place, and certainly that one doesn't. So I recognize if you like, the sinfulness, that's a kind of Christian term to use, the sinfulness of human institutions and the capacity they have to oppress people. And what was, a new experience for me, because I'm, a tall, white, well-educated man, it was a new experience for me to be oppressed. And why shouldn't I be oppressed? Lots of people, like some of the people I can see on this page, I know have been oppressed in their lives. So why should that shake my faith in God? God is ultimate reality for me. My higher power just is that reality, which is beyond our time and space. So God is not a man on a cloud. Doesn't wear white robes, have a beard as nice as mine, or anything like that, because God just is. And that transcendental sense is shared by all kinds of spiritual people who just have a sense that there is reality out there. So all my shit was the stuff that goes on in life. And, we all have, well, I've never had the shit that most of you have had to deal with in life. But I found, and one of the things I think about being a Christian for me is that the reality that is God, the reality beyond this planet and our time and space and this universe, enormous as it is, that just is God, has taken the shape of love. So that when I was very down and I had some bad depression and really bad times with it, all this nonsense, what I felt was I felt held. That's what I felt. I was held. It was okay. It wasn't okay, but it was okay through this. And to be honest, Lawrence was like an angel, really, because he was like the presence of God beside me. Whatever I was going through, he was just so steadily loving. I've never used that expression before, but he was like a messenger of God. And as he's an atheist, that's going some.
I forgot to mention that's true. That's something that's really important, is that Lawrence is a long-term sober member, but he's also a hardcore atheist. So
very committed to
a bit of yin and yang going on there, right?
And we had a lot of talking to do when we first got together, and we've come to a kind of good place. But for both of us, we've had very tough things to experience, each one of us, and the other has been, an important mediator of solidity and strength and love. I think at that point it's been very important.
So I just wanted to riff on, we had a conversation earlier this week about the machinations of the church and of all churches. And I guess, were you aware of before this, in terms of, I'm sure you were, in terms of in AA and all the different fellowships, there's quite a lot of difficulty with people finding a higher power, because they have that perception of the kind of traditional dogma, for both, the big churches, the guy, like you said, the beard in the clouds, with the beard in the clouds, and the judgment thing. Were you aware of that? And did your experience sort of bring that home more to you in terms of the work perhaps that the church has to do, in terms of maybe looking at things maybe from a 12-step perspective, perhaps?
I think what's really impressed me about getting to know people, particularly in AA, and to a certain extent in Al-Anon, but particularly in AA, was that following the 12 steps has massively powerful resonances with what I understand the Christian journey to be like, to be about. I mean, I think in sort of historical terms, I think there are quite kind of strong connections with people who were Christians early on in things. But actually, I'm quite clear. I've always been clear, and I'm always, it's undeniable that for people to be practicing Christians, that you're actually being asked to go on a journey with Jesus Christ, not to go into a church and sit in a thing and believe stuff out of a book. So it's a personal engagement, just as I think anyone who's involved in a 12-step journey knows very well. It's a massive personal engagement with this company of people that you're amongst, who sustain you, and beyond that you may find a higher power, as it were, sits outside that. I know for some people who don't have a conception of a higher power that's right out there, actually it's you and your kind of collective consciousness. And I think that's probably what Lawrence would say, from that perspective, that collective consciousness that is so tremendously powerful and important.
Would you say that perhaps like the currency of AA is kind of love and compassion and helping other suffering human beings or suffering entities? And oftentimes in this modern world, organizations whose currency is not that, but maybe more in money. Was that perhaps a factor, do you think, in terms of, or was it just ego? Was it an ego thing with the church? in terms of your situation, or was there something to do with the currency, or they were afraid of it? Was it existential for them? Because to me, like I say, I mean, I'm not a Christian, but there is a currency of AA. It's based on the principle of helping other people and using whatever, love or compassion. And what's the difference then between that, which is probably more like Jesus Christ than a lot of maybe churches? I don't know. That's only my opinion. What would you say is the difference? And where does it change? Where is the difference?
Well, I'm not sure there is a tremendous difference. I mean, my experience of trying to live out the Christian life is that the qualities and the values of love and compassion are absolutely what I'm trying to live out on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in a church ministry, it was important to me to kind of exemplify that, and certainly absolutely in chaplaincy, in sitting alongside the bed of the sick and the dying. That's totally what you wanted to do. The focus is absolutely on that other person and on supporting them in whatever way they found was good for them. It's not about me, it's about them. And love and compassion isn't about you, it's about them. What I love about AA is that you're so straightforward. So this love and compassion comes with a pretty hard edge sometimes, because you guys don't put up with bullshit from people, and
no,
you're not coy about saying that. There's a kind of, churches feel they've got to be nicey often, and that's crap. Jesus overturned the tables of the money changers in the temple. He was not above doing things that he went to parties with bad people and had a great time.
Prostitutes and whatever, yes.
Prostitutes and people who drank too much, for example, Hey,
you don't hang around with them, God.
No, exactly. So, and he actually, it's interesting that the Jesus who does that sort of thing, there's a lovely word in the Bible which describes God, and it says that God is, in Greek, he's prosopolemsia, which means he's no respecter of persons. He doesn't care what you're like or who you are. God loves you for you. And that's something that, so it's not, lovely Jesus and nasty God up there busy judging you. Actually, exactly that same quality of being someone whose arms are open to anybody in any circumstance or state is right at the heart of our faith. So when the institution fails, that's disappointing, but it just makes me, I'm not getting off the bus. I just want to try and live this one out and be to commend by my actions rather than making pronouncements. So that's
okay. So there's a message going to go into chat. So pretty soon if you've got a question for Jeremy with regards to what we spoke about today, and again, just so if you've got a question about that, please raise your hand and we'll come to you. Just finally, you did touch on it, and this is something that we ask all our guests: is what is God? What is God? Who is God? What's your? A lot of people say they don't know or whatever. And last week we tried to corner Frank, the Zen guy, and he wouldn't commit too much. But I just wonder, in terms of what is God for you? What does that mean? What does the word God mean? And who is God? What is God?
Okay, so I mean, I'm a really boring, quite kind of ordinary Christian, really. And I understand, for one of the kind of ways Christians understand God is to say that there's, you remember that, you may know the story of Moses and the burning bush in the wilderness.
Yes.
So Moses goes off, he's had to run away from Egypt, he's an outcast, he's in a mess, he runs off into the desert, finds somebody who'll take him in, he sees a girl he likes, and the guy says, well, if you work for me for X years for nothing, and do an okay job, I might let you marry her. I might. So he goes, okay, fine. Because men, if they get in that situation, will pretty much do anything to get the girl they want. So he's out there looking after the sheep and whatever, and he sees the burning bush, and God appears to him The bush burns, it's not consumed, it doesn't get any smaller, it just keeps burning. He can't make any sense of this. And God tells him, I am who I am. I'm reality. God just says, I'm reality. So for me, I'm clear. God is the reality beyond all the changeable stuff that we're living in. You know, I'm a blink of an eye in the history of the universe. The atoms that make me up will dissolve and they'll go and be somebody else's atoms. I think it's pretty good class ones from me, but you know, it's just atoms, and my body will dissolve and blah blah. That's it. I'm gone. Few people will remember me for a bit, then they won't. But behind it, I am who I am. I am reality. God is reality. And then if I want to say, well, yeah, but what's that reality like? The Christian answer is, well, look in the face of Jesus Christ. Have a look at this man. Look how he lived. Look how he treated people. Look what he said to do. Look how he said to look after the neighbor. And who's your neighbor? Well, your neighbor's anyone who needs your help. He treated people the way you guys and the 12 steps treat people. You know, anyone who wants to get sober, you're welcome. Come in. If you want to stop drinking, we're here for you. Anyone who wants to get in touch with real life, come and find Jesus. He's here for you. So that's how I know. We're told that Jesus is the icon of God. Well, we look at icons to give us they're kind of picture, aren't they? So Jesus is the one who, as it were, displays the reality behind, as it were, the human face.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone, but
I think it does. It's sort of it's quite surprising for me because it certainly doesn't. That's not what I expected. Somebody who's a man of cloth to say, and I think it's very it's opened my eyes definitely. So thank you very much. I'm going to open up the.
If I can just, the third element of that is, and this is very traditional kind of Christian teaching: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, or Mother, Word, and Breath of Life, you might want to say. Indeed, the word spirit in the Bible is a feminine word, but the Spirit of God is, in Christians' sense, that living presence that kind of draws you into that search, into your step 11. That's the movement from God's side, saying, come on, there's more for you to discover, pulling you along. Okay, that's enough. I've stopped now.
Wonderful.
Questions?
Okay, so thank you very much. And I'm going to go to Kirk in Los Angeles. Kirk, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a two-part question, if I may. So, I grew up in like a Mormon household, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
And I was kicked out at 14 for being gay.
Yeah.
So from that experience, I rejected all spirituality and was militantly atheist.
Yeah.
And upon my addiction phase, I'm starting to have to rediscover the possibility of spirituality.
Yeah.
And so the two-part question is like, have you heard much about like the scientific community's approach to spirituality? And then secondarily, where would a beginner begin when they've come from that sort of viewpoint?
Okay, say a bit more, Kirk, about the scientific community.
So in doing my step 2, I've been doing some research about how there have been scientists who, were atheists throughout the entirety of their work, but around age 50 or so, they were so awe-inspired by the complexities of the universe that the only way that they could describe it was that it would be by some creative, mindset or creative person.
Yeah.
And I guess during the times of like the famous philosophers, when they begun to try to describe the ways in which the world works, it created a diverge between the scientific community and the religious community because the institution did not support it.
Yeah.
But the idea that those two don't have to be separate, that they can coincide, perhaps.
Yeah. I don't think that's a strange idea. There are many more scientists who have an active and a kind of engaged spirituality than I think popularly we're led to believe. you know, you're led to believe, oh, you can either be religious or you can be scientific. But of course, it's not that. That ain't necessarily so, and it isn't so for quite a lot of scientists. In a sense, to tell you where to start, in a way, I don't want to presume, because I don't know, you know, what there is in Los Angeles. I just don't know. And it will be interesting to do a bit of poking around and see who are the leading scientists at, you know, in universities in California, and see if there are some of them who have a kind of spiritual path that they follow, and maybe even approach them, maybe even find out who's where and what, and go and talk to them. They're just people. If we were here in England, I could suggest one or two people, but we're not. So in a sense, you need someone who's going to be able to relate to you, and yeah, it may be.
But perhaps like separate from a scientific viewpoint, like where would you suggest somebody who?
Oh, just can you whiz up to where's Grace Cathedral? Is that San Francisco?
I'm not sure, but find
Yeah, look up Grace Cathedral. Go and find the dean of Grace Cathedral. She's a great woman, Susan Russell.
Okay.
Susan Russell's a good person to go and talk to. She's absolutely fantastic.
Perfect. Thank you.
And she might be helpful. And she's also a lesbian, so that's good. She'll understand that bit as well.
Perfect.
Oh, I hope I didn't doubt her. No, I'm sure I didn't. No, Susan.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Kirk. It's great to see you. And just to remind everyone that we're here every Friday. Just to reiterate that, we come here every Friday, same time every week, and we investigate all creeds, all kinds of spirituality, all kinds of religions. And next week is something at the other end of where Jeremy's coming from, definitely. So we've got a full book, as shall we say. So Kaiser, I was just wondering if you've got a question.
Mute yourself, bud.
Hi, Kaiser.
Hey there. Hey, Jeremy. Yeah, so I'm curious, as a person of faith and a leader in a faith community, what particular ways do you personally communicate with your version of God, or maybe Christ? Is it through standard petitionary prayer? And what happens? How do you receive the answers to, or how do you pray?
Okay. So I pray on Zoom. Can you hear me? Have you lost me?
No, there you go.
Am I there? I'm there. Okay. So I pray on Zoom with a group in my church morning and evening. So a lot of that is reading and listening and silence. And not a lot of petition, to be honest, because I don't think God just tweaks the universe when you ask to, actually. You know, so what I'm trying to do, I think, is bring some of the pain, bring some of the loneliness, bring some of the bereavement, bring some of the anguish, bring some of the anger. Our politics make me very angry at the moment, so I want to bring that, and I just want to kind of hold it there before God and just say, there you go, that's how it is. And because in the end of the day, I don't know what's best. I don't know what's best. And in doing that, I suppose I'm also saying I want to be open to be changed. That's part of my step 11 in that way, very importantly, is that I'm wanting to be open to be changed. So I try and do those times of prayer, and they're about between 20 and 30 minutes morning and evening. And I'm trying to do that in quite a disciplined way, so that I have, you know, so Lawrence says, are you going to your meeting now? So yeah, I'm off now to my meeting. Then he says, when are we having tea? I said, when I get back from my meeting in the evening. So 2 meetings a day with me. And it's just a small group. It's about 7 or 8 of us. who log on, and because I'm not in church, I'm not responsible for a church at all now, or a congregation. The bishop will not let me do that. I'm not allowed. I'm a priest, but I'm not allowed to operate as one. So I have to just accept that that is how it is at the moment. And maybe I'll never be allowed to the rest of my life. But I'm still a priest. I'd love to be able to take a communion service or preach or do that stuff, but I can't at the moment. So I just have to try and be as faithful as I can, given the limitations that are not of my making. There we go. Is that any help? I hope.
Thank you very much. Cheers again. Thanks, Kaiser, for that. Now, Tina's asked a question. She'd just like to know, have you got an official story? Is there anywhere that we can hear your story? Are you writing a book, or is there a blog or anything there where we can get the full? Because obviously we've had a bit of a cut up version there. So is there anywhere that you've got the whole thing?
There's quite a long article on me on BuzzFeed. There was a big BuzzFeed article, and I can't remember where it's gone. I've got a blog also from the choir pews or from the back row or something. I can't remember what it's called now.
Okay.
Oh God, I'll find it and just stick it in chat, and you can read my blog there. Is that okay, Tina?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tina. Thanks for asking that. Now, Rick's got a really, really good question. Rick is our mate who comes to a lot of these meetings that we hold. So I'm just trying to find you there, Rick. If you could just quickly unmute yourself, that'd be great, mate. And you can ask your question.
Hey everyone, my name's Rick and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, mate.
Glad to be here as well. I have a question. You touched on to step 11, is God pulling me along to do more? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And also, the other question is, do you do anything like a two-way prayer?
What's a two-way prayer?
Two-way prayer is through prayer and meditation. So I've been taught that prayer is that where I ask God a question, and the meditation part is where I sit in quiet and listen to it. But I also share that with somebody in order to find out whether it's just self or it's God's will relating back to me.
Yeah, I don't do that in a formal way. I don't think I ever have, actually. I do quite a lot of meditation, silent prayer. That's very much a part of my kind of spiritual resource and practice. And I think I'm always, I'm very cautious, to be honest. There were periods in my life when I was very much into kind of quite Pentecostal expressions of Christian faith, where people were getting what they said were prophecies from God and this sort of thing, and people coming up with messages and all that stuff. And I am very cautious about that now, I have to say, because I had a lot of experience of quite a lot of fairly vulnerable people being very manipulated by that kind of religion. So I'm pretty, I'm not too keen on that. And so in my listening, I also want to be just reflecting a bit carefully about whether I'm really hearing the voice of God, and check that one out as we go along the line. Maybe I think I've got a bit of a direction here, a bit of a steer from my meditation. Well, I'll take a few steps down that road, then I want to check it out. I usually ring up somebody like Jackie or some person with their head screwed on and say, Jackie, what do you think? And she goes, that's a load of rubbish, or whatever, So I've got friends I'll check stuff out with. And I mean, what I've also learned is there was a period when I had a big breakdown in 2007. I came out, my marriage fell apart. I had to kind of move away and start again. And I wasn't in a good place. I couldn't cope with church at all at that stage. But what I discovered was quite how often I seemed to hear a word from God from people right outside church, and sometimes right outside any kind of faith, but who spoke a word of wisdom to me that helped sustain me. So that was you know, that was a really good lesson to learn. And so I, you know, if I am looking for a steer, a guidance, I want to keep my ears open to all kinds of resources coming at me from all sorts of directions. I hope that helps. Is that okay?
Thank you very much. That's great. So Kaiser's actually just going to put something in chat about two-way prayer. And I think it was what the Akron, what they used to do in Akron in the early days of AA, and I think it's having a bit of resurgence. I think that's what you're referring to, Rick. And there's quite a few Zoom meetings going on about it now. I think there's one a week. I think in Akron it's with a father or somebody, a preacher. So yeah, they're well good. They're really, really good.
I'm cautious about hearing or claiming to hear the voice of God, because my capacity for self-delusion is massive.
Yeah.
When I want stuff, I can kid myself that it's really what God really wants me to do, but it isn't. It ain't necessarily so.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, self-delusion. I have no idea what you're talking about. Jeez. I don't know where you got that from.
No.
I've got a question from Anne. I don't know if Anne wants to ask her or she wants me to ask it. Do you want to ask it, Anne? Yeah. So Anne. Oh, sorry, Anne. There you go.
Hello, Anne.
Excuse me.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Jeremy, how you and Lawrence are both doing such different approaches to the 11th step in our 12-step programs. How do you guys work that? What does it look like in your relationship?
Okay, I think the answer to that, Anne, is that we have a pretty deep respect of each other and a respect of the integrity with which each one approaches this side of living and development. So I think I understand why he stands where he stands. He would say, I think, that he doesn't entirely understand why I stand where I stand, but he did want to check out that I wasn't one of those really nuts Christians, because he couldn't have hacked that. So we talked through some stuff, and he wanted to know if I was a will Jesus find me a parking space Christian? And I said, no, I'm really not that kind of a Christian. That's not the way life works. If occasionally a parking space comes, that's lovely, but it's nothing to do with Jesus sorting it for me, as far as I'm concerned. It may be for other people, but that's not how I look at it. So we had some quite tough conversations to start with, to be honest. I mean, Jackie will tell you, we don't argue. We're just not, we're very, very together. We love each other very dearly. And so that respect for the integrity with which each one is working out that step 11 in their way means that it just doesn't become an area of conflict. It's just not an area of conflict. It really isn't. And in a sense, it's more an area of support. He's tremendously supportive of my ministry. For the last 4 years, I've actually been working as a civil celebrant. I've been taking non-religious and semi-religious funerals mostly. And it wasn't me, it was Lawrence who said, actually, Jay, it's still your ministry. You're still being a priest in doing that. So he recognized that. It wasn't me naming it. It's quite interesting. So it's not an area of conflict. It's an area of mutual support in a way.
Thank you very much, Anne. That's great. So I'm going to just pick up on a few things that you said there before, and I know these are kind of potentially controversial, but I just want to get your take on it. Jesus is often portrayed, and it has the stereotypical portrayal of Jesus in Hollywood movies, in all kinds of paintings that you get, and I can remember that vividly as a child. My parents were Catholic, is a white guy with a beard and long flowing robes, and had a glow around his head, and that whole kind of, it was almost horrific and foreboding, and that whole sort of dominating kind of thing. And I remember as a child being quite terrified when my grandmother took me to church for the first time.
Yeah.
And I know that still hangs on a lot of people who come into the fellowship, who come into AA or Al-Anon. They have a real problem in sifting that image from spirituality. You know, they have a real problem with that. So and this is just your opinion, and I don't want to cause any kind of issues for you or anything, but who was Jesus? What is Jesus? And was he like you said, was he the guy that went around really angrily throwing over tables in the synagogue and chucking the moneylenders out, and went around castigating people and telling people what to do? Who was Jesus, and how much did that message change since 2,000 odd years ago? Who was he?
Well, we've been left 4 pictures of him, which we call the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all wrote a story. There's overlap and there's difference. The authors of those stories have their own kind of angle on things, and that comes out. The first thing to say is, I'm really sorry, but Jesus was not white. So that's the first thing. Let's get that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was Middle Eastern, and he was Jewish, and he was just not like any of those pictures, for sure. So sometimes you get people who get very agitated when you get pictures of a black Jesus, a really black Jesus. But we shouldn't get agitated about it. We've painted him as a white man for far, far, far too long. So he was that. He came from a not quite a peasant family, but he came from a family that was, you know, of modest means. He was itinerant. He lived off the kindness of other people. We're told that there were some wealthy women who basically bankrolled his ministry and took him in and fed him. So he and his very odd group of associates, I mean, they're really, they weren't a group of people who were likely to see eye to eye at all. They were about as odd as pretty much any church congregation or any AA meeting is. So, you know, Jesus's followers were not a homogeneous group by any means, any manner of means at all. And he went round announcing that God's activity, God's energy, God's life was back in a new way. That's what he did. And the ultimate test of it was when the Romans, who were politically in charge, agreed to get rid of him, and he was killed. And the bizarre thing is, nobody expects dead people to be alive again, but strangely enough, his followers started to announce that he was alive and had appeared to them. And so that was the story. That was the story. And that, you know, so Jesus was sometimes angry, sometimes he was transgressive. So he, you know, fed his, gave things to his followers to eat and drink on days when they shouldn't have. He didn't always follow the rules, but he was also, he went to synagogue regularly. He went to the temple in Jerusalem to say prayers there. So he wasn't outside his world of faith, but he stretched the boundaries. And he clearly got up the noses of a lot of people, because he had a kind of way of communicating with people that meant they felt they were getting, you know, their step 11 was moved on massively by meeting Jesus, basically. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Just to follow up, and I know I think Lebowski's got a question, and I will come to him because that's always fun when James asks a question. It seems to me, and again, this is like theory, and I'm not talking about, you know, from left field or anything, but there was a school of thought that he perhaps traveled to the east, and I've heard that said on several occasions, that perhaps before his during those early 33 years between that we have very little record of what he did, is that he actually, because from what you've described, and I love how you describe your higher powers, it seems to me it's almost like, it's, dare I say it, a little bit Eckhart Tolle in terms of you're living in the spirit of the now, and there's no kind of judgment, and you're living in the now. So I don't know, I might be wrong, but is that, would I be true? Was that true? Have you heard any has there been any stories of that?
We know nothing about the silent years. We really don't. Maybe he did. Maybe he did. I think traveling was quite tricky in those days. You know, it wasn't that easy to travel long distances. So maybe he went east and came back, but we don't know, to be honest. We have no, I don't think there's a single reputable source that will indicate anything about Jesus from age 12 to about 30. We just don't know.
Okay. That's
but it will be wonderful to know, actually, but we just don't, I don't think.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things, only a time machine, and maybe in a time after we'll know. So before I go to Lebowski, actually, I realized that our friend Donal in South Yorkshire had a question. Do you want to ask it, Donal, or do you want me to ask it? I'm unmuting you there, Donal.
No, and not Yorkshire, David, is it?
South Ireland, sorry, mate. Ireland.
Sorry, exactly.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I want to. I think you're very brave. First of all, I just want to acknowledge that in how you addressed it. I was asking who you experience yourself to really be. Your description of God, you know what I mean? I could go with, you know what I mean, to a great extent, because I accept God as being the breath of all breaths. And I keep it that, I have to keep it that simple. Yeah. I happen to have two uncles that went on to be bishops. I had an aunt and nun. I lived with a woman that gave me my last two children, and she believed herself to be an incarnation of Hildegard of Bingham. And she gave me a beautiful daughter who's an opera singer in New York, but is back in Ireland now. All of these things, and having gone and having searched between I'd rejected the Catholic Church. I went into the Mormons. I went in one side and out the other. I found they were prejudiced for me. You know what I mean? And I read the gospel, the gospel according to Thomas, the Aquarian gospel, then the Dead Sea Scrolls, and went on then to read the Bhagavad Gita, and searched. And then there was only one person that I found that answered. And that was a poet who tried to unite the Hindus and the Muslims back in 1480. That was a man called Kabir.
Yeah.
And the lovely, beautiful thing where he put, and the responsibility, he's given me the responsibility to find God within myself.
Yeah.
And that has been the journey to find that, and sought through prayer and meditation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, when I pray, the only thing I can pray for myself is devotion, the gift of devotion. Because if I have that gift of devotion, I have God by the balls. And that's as I see it, you know what I mean? Because I have him by the short hair, because he has to come for the devotee. He must come for the devotee, as far as I understand. Yes. And to feel that love, you know what I mean, in my daily life, is what I go for. So I have to pray for that, but and the rest is to help one another. That love, that love is, you know what I mean, is what I embrace. But religion to me, it religare, it means to bind, to rebind.
Yes.
It's from the French, as far as my understanding goes. Or religio is to make real, to realize. And you were talking about being real, and that I can totally embrace the reality, because it has to be real.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Donald.
I'm sorry.
Can I ask you
a question? Sorry.
Donald, he wants to ask you a question.
want to ask you a question. My former mother-in-law was from Westport, County Mayo. Where are you?
God love you. We
Where are
live
you?
there in Ahaggar,
there.
beside
Oh,
In
I
a very
love it.
sacred place.
in a very
love
sacred
it.
spot where the chariots came through
So have
before
you
St.
climbed the
Patrick.
Reek? Have you climbed the Reek?
I built my house to take it as its view.
Oh,
I
well,
built
there
it
you go.
on a ley line to
Can I say
Glastonbury
that
and
is one of the
Egypt.
most
Yeah,
spiritual places I know.
yeah,
Crow Patrick.
yeah. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, if you ever go there, Jeremy, Rita cooks a wicked lunch, believe me.
I sold
More
my
than you'll
house
ever
on
eat,
that
believe me.
site.
Yeah, they're wonderful
You're
people.
welcome to Ennis.
Welcome to Ennis.
Yeah,
Oh,
now.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Donald, and thank you very much, Rita. That was lovely. Thanks, Donald.
Yeah.
It's always good to hear from you. And now we're going to go, the final question, the penultimate question is going to go to our mate Lebowski. James, do you want to come in?
Sure. I don't have the ultimate question, I don't think, but that's setting the bar high. And honestly, I was kind of going down the same road that Donald went down, no resentment, but he sort of stole my thunder right up until having God by the balls. I'm still trying to compose myself, actually. Thank you, Donald, for that.
So there's no question then, James. Well done.
No, I wanted to.
Well,
Yes, I actually, I don't know if I have a question, but I would like to share my experience, and that is that I came in with a vociferous hostility towards God into AA, and I wanted to blame the Catholic Church, you know, because that was where I got all my programming from. But while I was in AA, I like Donald said, I went on a search for an understanding of God, and read everything from Raja Yoga to Buddhism to everything. And a lady gave me a book in AA called Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox.
Yeah.
And in that book, he said that it didn't matter who you thought Jesus was, whether you thought he was the Son of God or a public servant that came to a really bad end. He was the master of brevity, and there's a part in there where he says, he explains in some detail that opened up my heart about the Lord's Prayer. And he said, just the very beginning, with the two words, our Father, he describes our relationship to God, God's relationship to us, and our relationship to each other, just in those two words. And I'm getting kind of choked up. All of a sudden, all of this animosity I had towards all of that institutionalizing just disappeared. And I realized it didn't matter who Jesus was. Those words were so powerful. And it opened up a space in me that had not been opened before, I don't think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, James.
I wanted to just say a word about the grabbing God by the balls thing, because certainly in my experience, no matter how devoted I've been sometimes, and I've wanted to be, I've tried to be, there are some times when it feels like God isn't there, that God's gone off. It's what Christians sometimes call the dark night of the soul. And that you just have to wait, you know, and put in context your own experience, your own life. It's just it's a grain of sand. So hang on in there, keep pursuing your path, following your practices, whatever it is you do, and that reality will come back to meet you in ways that will make sense for you.
Thank you very much. Cheers for that. Thanks, James and Jeremy. And just to say that Jackie O has put Jeremy's blog in the chat there from the choir stall. So you can go and have a look at that. And I guess if Jeremy wants to hang around for a bit after we finish the podcast, I'm sure if you want to say hello, because he's a very, very nice man in here. I know he even talks to the likes of me, which is, you know, a bit of a surprise. And I just want to finish the final question as we do with this, and it's our sort of desert island disc question. is Jeremy, just imagine you've won the lottery and you're rolling in cash. You've bought yourself a massive yacht. You've got this yacht and it's cruising around the world, and you're about 20 miles west of a beautiful tropical island. The boat starts sinking and you haven't got any rush. It's gonna sink really quickly, and all you can grab, you've got all your books there, the best books you've ever had, and you've got a plastic bag and you've got time to grab one book. You jump in the water and the book in the bag, and you swim to the island, and you're going to be there for at least 3 weeks to a month. What's the book and why, and who wrote it?
It's the Bible, but I don't know who wrote it. Written by so many. Well, half the Bible, we have no idea who wrote it, to be honest. But I'll take it. I've got the Psalms. I've got people in the Bible who get angry. I've got people who get sad. I've got people who get despairing. I get people who get happy. I've got Jesus telling me how I ought to be living. I've got amazing stories of burning fiery furnaces and dens of lions, and I've got lots of distraction. So I'll take the Bible, and that'll do me for a few weeks until they come and rescue me.
Yeah, that's your Netflix. Good. I'm glad.
It is, absolutely. I've got a great story.
So listen, it's been great having you. Thank you very much, everyone. This podcast, thank you very much, Jeremy, and just everyone. I think on behalf of everyone, they're all clapping. If you obviously this will be on a podcast in order, you can't see all the hands going together. That's amazing, like seals. And just to say to everyone that we will be back next week. We have another guest. Again, I don't want to give the game away, but it's certainly probably at the other end of the spectrum to Jeremy. Has an interesting take on spirituality and a higher power, and very much in the 12 steps. And that we'll put that on the Facebook page early next week. So that won't be one to be missed. So this has been Here's Tom with the Weather. And I'd just like to thank Anne and Kaiser and Jackie and Lebowski and their help in the background of setting this up and keeping it going. And as I say, we'll be back next Friday. And then just a little teaser, we have an extra special guest in 2 weeks' time, and I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. It is none other than Rupert Spira will be on this program in 2 weeks' time. So come along for that, but I'll see you next week. Again, thank you very much, Jeremy. Cheers, mate. Recording. Thank you.